The spit hung in the air for what felt like an eternity, not flying, not falling, just suspended there between arrogance and consequence, between a boy who had never been told no and a woman who had heard it her entire life. When it finally landed on Ruth Calloway's cheek, sliding slowly down toward her worn apron, the Pinewood Diner didn't just go quiet. It went silent in the way a forest goes silent before a storm. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The kind that tells you something fundamental has shifted in the world. Table 9 had been watching. 10 men, 10 leather vests, 10 sets of eyes that had seen things most people only have nightmares about. They had been coming to this diner every other Thursday for 20 years. Same table, same order, same quiet respect for the woman who always remembered how they took their coffee. But on this particular morning, in this particular moment, coincidence became fate. And Garrett Hargrove III was about to learn that in this diner on this day he had picked the wrong woman to humiliate, because those 10 men just made it their business. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Every war has a beginning. Every battle has a first shot. And this story started 22 hours before that spit left Garrett's mouth. It started the way Ruth Calloway's days had started for the last 31 years. In darkness, in silence, in the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix anymore. 5 in the morning, and the alarm hadn't even sounded yet. Ruth's eyes opened on their own, the way they always did these days. Her body knew the rhythm better than any clock. 62 years of living will do that, teach you that rest is a luxury. That morning comes whether you're ready or not, that the ceiling in the dark looks the same whether you slept 4 hours or 6, and that the ache in your knees is going to be there either way, so you might as well swing your feet to the floor and get moving. She lay there for a moment in the pre-dawn dark of her small house on Maple Street, the kind of house that used to be called a starter home back when people believed you started somewhere and moved up. Ruth had started here 38 years ago with her husband Walter. They were going to move up, going to get that place with the big yard and the porch swing where Walter could sit in the evenings and tell stories about the men he had served with, about the time he carried a wounded sergeant 2 miles through rain to a field hospital, about the time he rebuilt a generator in the dark using nothing but a wrench and a prayer, and the kind of stubbornness that the Army either beats out of you or turns into your best quality. Then Walter died, and starter homes become forever homes real quick when you are raising a granddaughter on a waitress's salary. The floorboards creaked as Ruth swung her legs out of bed. Every morning, same creak, same sharp reminder in her knees and hips that the body keeps score even when the spirit refuses to quit. The arthritis had been getting worse. The prescription bottles on her nightstand told that story. 2 of them empty, one with 3 pills left. The insurance had lapsed again last month. Something about paperwork. Always paperwork. She would buy more when she could. Until then, there was ibuprofen and stubbornness. Ruth moved through her morning routine in near darkness, muscle memory guiding her hands. Coffee first. Always coffee. The cheap kind that comes in a red can because when you have been drinking it for 40 years, you stop tasting the difference. While it percolated, she laid out Lily's clothes for school. 8 years old, 2nd grade, smart as a whip, and twice as stubborn as her grandmother. The child was still asleep down the hall, the only grandchild Ruth had left. The only piece of her son Micah that wasn't sitting in a prison cell upstate. Don't think about Micah, not this early, not when you need to get through a shift. But the mind wanders where it wants. And Ruth's mind wandered to the framed photo on the mantel. Micah in his high school football uniform. Bright smile, bright future, before the pills, before the arrest. Before he became another statistic in a crisis nobody seems able to stop. There was another photo beside it. Walter in his army dress uniform. Sergeant Walter Calloway. 2 tours. A Purple Heart he kept in a cigar box because he said the men who deserved medals never got them. Walter had come home whole in body but carrying something in his eyes that never fully left. He managed it, worked at the lumber mill, coached Little League, loved Ruth the way some men love quietly, constantly, like gravity. The kind of love that doesn't announce itself, just holds everything in place. Then the cough started, then the diagnosis. Then the Veterans Affairs Office telling them his treatment had been deemed not cost-effective. Benefits reduced. Coverage denied. Appeals lost in paperwork that seemed designed to exhaust people into giving up. Walter Calloway died on a Tuesday afternoon in November of 2011, holding Ruth's hand, apologizing for leaving her, as if dying was something he had done wrong, as if the system that failed him was somehow his fault. His last words were not dramatic, not cinematic. He said, "Take care of Lily Ruthie," and then he was gone. And the room was quieter than any room should ever be. Ruth had found the medical bills afterward, stacked in a shoebox under their bed. Walter had been hiding them. Hundreds of pages of denials and reductions and bureaucratic language that said in every possible way except plainly that Sergeant Walter Calloway's life was not worth the cost of saving it. She kept that shoebox, kept it the way you keep evidence of a crime you cannot yet name. Something about those papers had never sat right with her. The reductions had been sudden, unexplained. Other veterans at the VA hospital had told similar stories over the years. Benefits cut without warning, appeals that disappeared into a void, families left to choose between medication and groceries. But Ruth was a waitress, not a lawyer, not an investigator. She didn't have the tools or the time or the energy to fight a system built to outlast people like her. So the shoebox stayed under the bed, and the questions stayed unanswered, and life went on because it had to. Lily stirred as Ruth cracked eggs into a pan. "Grandma," small voice, "sleep thick. Morning, baby girl. You got another hour. Go back to sleep. Is Daddy coming home soon?" The egg sizzled. Ruth's hand didn't shake. Couldn't let it shake. Not for this question. Not for the 100th time she had answered it. "Soon, honey. He's getting better. You just focus on school." "Okay. Okay, Grandma. Soon." That word doing a lot of heavy lifting. Micah had 4 more years on his sentence. 4 more years of Lily asking. 4 more years of Ruth lying. But sometimes love looks like a lie that gets a child through the night. Sometimes love looks like scrambled eggs at 5:30 in the morning and a voice that doesn't crack when it says soon. 6:30 and Ruth's 1998 Honda Civic coughed to life in the driveway. Check engine light glowing like it had been for the past 8 months. The mechanic said it was the catalytic converter. Said it would be about $1,200 to fix. Ruth said she would think about it. She had been thinking about it for 8 months. The thinking wasn't the problem. The $1,200 was the problem. $1,200 was 6 weeks of groceries. $1,200 was 2 months of Lily's after-school program. $1,200 was the difference between keeping the lights on and sitting in the dark. The drive to Pinewood Diner took 11 minutes through the sleeping streets of Ridge Creek, Montana. Population 4,200. The kind of town where everybody knows your name and half of them know your business. Where the biggest employer is the lumber mill on the north side and the biggest dream is getting out. Ruth had stopped dreaming about getting out somewhere around 1985. Now she dreamed smaller. Lily's college fund, the orthodontist bill, making it through another winter without the furnace dying. Dreams that would have embarrassed her at 20 but felt enormous at 62. Pinewood Diner sat on the corner of Main and 5th, single-story red brick, neon sign that said "Eat" in letters that had been buzzing since Reagan was president. The parking lot was empty except for Earl Tatum's pickup truck. Earl owned the place. 67 years old, former Marine. The kind of man who said Semper Fi unironically and meant every syllable. Ruth had been working for Earl for 31 years, longer than some marriages, longer than most careers. He had hired her in 1995 when she was 31 and desperate and willing to work any shift nobody else wanted. Over 3 decades later, she was still working those shifts. Not because she couldn't find something else, because Earl needed her and she needed to be needed. Because this diner was the closest thing she had to a home outside of Maple Street. The back door was unlocked. Always was. Earl believed locks kept out honest people and annoyed dishonest ones. "Morning, Ellie," Earl's voice from the kitchen. Gravel and cigarettes, though he had quit smoking 15 years ago. Some things leave a mark on your vocal cords, the way some things leave a mark on your soul. "Morning, Earl. Coffee's on. You're a saint. Just a man who knows you don't mess with a woman before she's had her caffeine." The diner smelled like it always did. Coffee and bacon grease and something else. Something Ruth could never quite name. Possibility, maybe? Or just nostalgia for a time when diners like this meant something more than cheap food and cheaper coffee. A time when a counter stool was a democratic institution. When a cup of coffee was a ticket to belonging. when the person who poured it was recognized as essential to the fabric of a community. She moved through her opening routine like a dancer who had performed the same piece 10,000 times. Filled the napkin dispensers, checked the salt and pepper shakers, wiped down the counters, flipped the sign from closed to open. Every movement practiced, every step economical. Ruth had learned a long time ago that efficiency was survival. Wasted motion meant wasted energy. Wasted energy meant getting home later. Getting home later meant less time with Lily. By 7, the first regular walked through the door. Vernon Weeks, retired postal worker, 73 years old, sat at the counter, same stool every single morning for 12 years. Ruth was pouring his coffee before he sat down. "Morning, Vernon." "Usual." He nodded. Didn't need to say it. 2 eggs over easy, bacon, wheat toast, orange juice. Some conversations you have so many times they become shorthand, become silence with understanding. That was what Ruth loved about this job, if she was being honest. Not the pay, which was terrible. Not the hours, which were worse. But the routine, the knowing, the way certain customers became fixtures, became family almost. The way she could pour coffee and know she had made someone's morning just a little bit better. Small victories. That is all life was after a certain age. String enough of them together and you called it a good day. 7:15 and the rumble started. Low at first, distant, like thunder rolling across the Montana plains, though the sky was clear and blue and wide enough to make you feel insignificant in the way only a Montana sky can. Then it grew, deeper, closer. The kind of sound you feel in your chest before you hear it with your ears. The kind of sound that makes dishes rattle in their racks and coffee cups tremble on their saucers. Vernon Weeks looked up from his newspaper. Earl stepped out from the kitchen. Ruth set down the coffee pot. Through the front windows they appeared. 10 motorcycles, Harley Davidsons every one, chrome catching the early morning sun like mirrors reflecting fire. They rolled into the parking lot in formation. Not aggressive, not chaotic, disciplined, military precise. The way men ride when they have ridden together so long, their bikes move as one organism. The Iron Covenant Motorcycle Club. That is what some people called them. The Brotherhood, that is what they called themselves. The patch on their vests told the story if you knew how to read it. An iron fist clenched around a gavel. The words stitched beneath, "Protect those who serve." The man who dismounted first was Boone Garrett. 61 years old, silver threading through his beard like wisdom earning its place. Eyes that had seen jungles and deserts and things civilians read about in newspapers but never truly understand. Eyes that had seen men die and economies collapse and governments lie and still managed to look for the good in things even when the world made that harder every year. They called him Hammer, not because he was violent. Boone Garrett had not thrown a punch in anger in over 2 decades. They called him Hammer because he was solid, unmovable. The kind of man who drove stakes into the ground and built foundations that lasted. The kind of man people turned to when the ground shook because they knew he wouldn't move. Behind him, 9 others swung off their bikes. Briggs Holloway, 59, they called him Wrench. Owned 3 auto shops across the state. Hands that could rebuild an engine blindfolded. Hands that had held his daughter while she died of leukemia at 17. Those same hands could take apart a carburetor and put it back together in the dark, but they had trembled like a child's when they closed his daughter's coffin. Colton Reed, 60. Doc to anyone who knew him. Former Army medic. The kind of man who had seen enough blood that the sight of it didn't faze him anymore, but the waste of it made him angry. 22 years in the service. 3 deployments. A back full of shrapnel and a mind full of faces he couldn't save. Deacon Pratt, 58. Shepherd, they called him. Retired Methodist minister. Still preached sometimes at the VA hospital. Still believed in redemption even when redemption seemed in short supply. Still prayed with hands that had once held a rifle and now held a Bible, and understood that both were tools for the same purpose, protection. Then Maddox Kenner, 57, a former tank commander who now ran a Veterans Outreach Center in Helena. Then Gage Thorne, 62, who had lost both legs below the knee in Desert Storm and walked on prosthetics with a steadiness that shamed younger men. Then Rowan Phelps, 59, Barrett Suggs, 61, Lawson Draper, 55, and Pike Crenshaw, 60. each carrying their own scars, their own stories, their own reasons for riding. They filed into Pinewood Diner with the easy familiarity of men who had ridden together for decades, men who had bled together, buried friends together, built something together that was bigger than themselves. Table 9, always Table 9. It had become their spot over 20 years of Thursday morning breakfasts. The way certain people claim certain pews in church, sacred almost. Ruth appeared with a coffee pot and 10 cups balanced on a tray. That same warm smile she gave Vernon Weeks. The same one she gave every customer who walked through that door. "Morning, gentlemen, right on time." Boone nodded, studying her face for just a moment longer than necessary. He noticed something in Ruth's eyes that morning. A weariness he recognized. A heaviness he had seen before in people who were carrying more than they should. He had seen it in his mother's eyes before. The Iron Covenant had a rule, one they had lived by for 30 years, one that Boone had written it himself after Lorraine Garrett put a gun to her head in 1978. Watch how people treat service workers. It tells you everything you need to know about a person's character. That rule existed because of a memory Boone carried like a scar. He had been 13 years old, sitting in a booth at a diner not unlike this one, watching his mother work the morning shift, watching her pour coffee with hands that never stopped moving, watching her smile at customers who didn't bother to look up from their plates. Lorraine Garrett was 36 years old, single mother, 2 jobs, a smile that could warm a room and a spine that could hold up a building. She had raised Boone alone after his father left when Boone was 3, raised him on tips and overtime in the belief that hard work was its own kind of dignity. And then the man came in, expensive suit, gold watch, the kind of man who took up space in a room the way weather takes up sky. He sat in Lorraine's section, ordered steak and eggs, complained about the coffee, complained about the weight, complained about the temperature of the butter. Each complaint delivered with the casual precision of someone who had perfected the art of making another human being feel worthless. Lorraine absorbed it, the way she always did, the way women in service learn to absorb cruelty the way sponges absorb water, silently, completely, until they are too heavy to hold anymore. But that morning was different. That morning the man crossed a line. He grabbed Lorraine's wrist when she reached for his plate, twisted it, called her something that Boone would never repeat, something that reduced his mother from a human being to an object, to nothing. Nobody in the diner moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody stood up, including 13-year-old Boone Garrett, who sat frozen in his booth eggs going cold, watching his mother's eyes go empty in a way they never fully recovered from. The man was later charged with assault. His lawyer, a young ambitious attorney named Lowell Hargrove, got him off on a technicality. Destroyed Lorraine's credibility on the stand, made her look like a liar seeking attention, made her feel one final time that the world did not consider her worth protecting. 2 weeks after losing that case, Lorraine Garrett was dead. Boone found her, came home from school, called her name, got silence, found her in the bathroom, the gun still in her hand, the note on the kitchen table. 3 words. "I am sorry." 48 years later, Boone still heard those 3 words every morning when he opened his eyes. Still saw the bathroom tile. Still felt the weight of knowing he could have done something. Should have done something. And the name Lowell Hargrove was carved into his memory the way dates are carved into tombstones. Permanent. Unforgivable. The name of the man who had made it possible for a courtroom to tell his mother that her pain didn't matter. That was why the Iron Covenant existed. That was why Boone had spent 30 years recruiting veterans who believed in the same simple principle. Protect those who serve, not because it was noble, because the alternative was a bathroom floor and a gun and a mother who thought nobody cared enough to stand. Ruth started pouring coffee. Boone watched the way her hands moved. Practiced. Efficient. The slight tremor in her right hand when she thought nobody was looking. The way she winced when she bent to set Colton's cup down. The way she smiled through what was clearly pain. "You doing all right?" Ruth Colton's voice. Quiet. Concerned. "Oh, you know me, Doc. Can't complain. That doesn't answer my question." Ruth's smile widened. Became armor. "I'm good. Really. You boys want your usual." Boone watched the exchange. Filed it away. Something was wrong. Maybe nothing serious. Maybe just life being life. But something. The Iron Covenant had another rule. When you see something, you do something. No exceptions, no excuses. They had been coming to this diner for 20 years, specifically because of Ruth Calloway, because she was what they had all been fighting for in their own way. A woman who showed up, who worked hard, who treated people with dignity even when dignity didn't pay the bills. She represented something, someone worth protecting, worth honoring, worth standing up for when the moment came. And at 7:45 on that particular Thursday morning, the moment was about to arrive. The Mercedes pulled into the parking lot like it owned the place, or like it was disappointed it didn't. Sleek, black, the kind of expensive that whispers instead of shouts. It angled across two parking spaces diagonal across the painted lines, like those lines were suggestions for people who had to follow rules. The driver's door opened and out stepped Garrett Hargrove III, 19 years old, phone already in hand, designer sunglasses catching the morning sun, hair that looked effortlessly messy in the way that required 45 minutes and $60 product to achieve. Clothes that cost more than Ruth made in a month, worn with the casual indifference of someone who had never checked a price tag. Never had to, never would have to, unless the world he had been born into suddenly decided to play by different rules. Garrett Hargrove III. That is what it said on his driver's license, on his credit cards, on the acceptance letter from Georgetown University that currently sat framed in his father's Senate office. G, his friends called him. The boys from prep school, the guys at the country club, the ones who had also never heard the word no without it being immediately followed by just kidding or I will handle it. Garrett Hargrove III was the kind of young man who had been raised to believe the world had been built for him, that other people existed to serve his convenience, that consequences were things that happened to other people, poor people, ordinary people, people who didn't have a senator for a father and a trust fund for a safety net. He was about to learn different. Garrett pushed through the door of Pinewood Diner without looking up from his phone, didn't acknowledge the other customers, didn't say good morning, just slid into a booth near the window and continued scrolling, his face illuminated by that blue glow, that anywhere but here light that told everyone in the room that wherever he was, he considered himself above it. Ruth approached with a menu and that same patient warmth she had shown everyone else this morning. Morning, honey, coffee to start. Garrett didn't look up. His thumb kept scrolling. Social media, something mindless, something more important than the human being standing next to him. Is it actually good coffee or that burnt diner garbage? Ruth's smile didn't falter. Couldn't afford to let it falter. Not if she wanted to keep this job. Not if she wanted to make rent this month. It's fresh. Made it 20 minutes ago. Whatever. Black. And I need a few minutes with the menu. He waved his hand, dismissive. The way you wave away a fly. The kind of gesture that says, you are not a person to me. You are an inconvenience. At table 9, Briggs set down his fork a little harder than necessary. Colton's jaw tightened. Deacon's eyes closed for just a second the way they did when he was asking God for patience instead of permission. Boone watched, said nothing. But he was watching. The way a man watches when he recognizes something familiar in the landscape. Something dangerous. Ruth returned with the coffee pot, poured carefully. Garrett took one sip and his face twisted like she had served him motor oil. This is what you call fresh. How long has this been sitting? Just made it like I said. Can I get you something else? You know what? Forget it. Just bring me egg whites. Whole wheat toast, dry. And I want fresh fruit, not the canned stuff, fresh. You understand the difference, right? The words were not just rude. They were calculated, each one designed to establish a hierarchy, to remind Ruth that he was up here and she was down there. It was a skill Garrett had perfected over 19 years of practice, the art of making people feel small without ever raising your voice or using obvious slurs. Just a tone, an implication, a question mark placed where it would cut deepest. You understand the difference, right? As if understanding the difference between fresh and canned fruit required a level of intelligence he doubted she possessed. Ruth wrote down the order. Her hand didn't shake. Couldn't let it shake. I will get that right out. Make sure you do. I'm kind of in a hurry. He said this while continuing to scroll through his phone, making it clear he was not in a hurry at all. He just wanted her to feel like her speed mattered to his convenience, like her entire purpose in this moment was to serve his timeline. At table 9, Boone set down his coffee cup. The ceramic clicked against the saucer just once, but in that moment it sounded loud, like a judge's gavel, like the first note of something that couldn't be taken back. Briggs leaned back in the booth, arms crossed, the way a man crosses his arms when he is keeping his hands busy so they don't do something he might regret. Colton's knuckles had gone white around his fork. They had seen this before. All of them had. The way certain people treated others when they thought nobody important was watching. The casual cruelty that came from never having to see service workers as human beings. The way Garrett Hargrove was treating Ruth Calloway was exactly the way someone had treated Lorraine Garrett in 1978. Boone remembered. He always remembered. That was his blessing and his curse. When Ruth returned to Garrett's table 12 minutes later, with his order egg whites, whole wheat toast, dry fresh strawberries, and melon on the side exactly as he had requested, Boone was already on edge. Every nerve in his body tuned to the same frequency it had been tuned to in combat, not aggression. Awareness, the ability to read a room the way a soldier reads terrain. When Garrett looked at that plate like Ruth had delivered something scraped off the bottom of a dumpster, every man at table 9 felt it. Garrett poked at the egg whites with his fork. His face showed theatrical disgust, the kind of disgust that is performed rather than felt, the kind designed to humiliate. These look runny. They are scrambled egg whites just like you ordered. I didn't say scrambled, I wanted them folded, like an omelet but without the yolk. And this toast. He held up the bread like evidence in a trial. This is barely warm. I said I wanted it toasted. Ruth's voice stayed level, professional, the way it had stayed level for 31 years of difficult customers and impossible demands. You said dry toast. Dry doesn't mean raw. It means toasted without butter. How do you not know that? Do you even know how to do your job? His voice rose just loud enough that the couple at the next table glanced over, then quickly looked away. The way people look away from accidents, from ugliness, from things they don't want to be part of, but can't help witnessing. I'm sorry for the confusion. Let me take it back and fix it for you. No, wait. Garrett picked up his phone, opened the Notes app, started typing like he was documenting evidence for a case he intended to win. Let me spell this out for you since this seems complicated. I want egg whites folded, not scrambled. I want toast that is actually toasted. Whole wheat, no butter, no jam, nothing on it. I want the fruit on a separate plate, not touching anything else. Do you think you can handle that? Or should I draw you a picture? Ruth took the plate. Her hands were steady, but her voice was quieter now, smaller, the way a voice gets smaller when dignity is being compressed into a space too tight to hold it. I will get that fixed right away. She walked back to the kitchen. Earl was already remaking the order. He had heard everything. The whole diner had heard everything. The walls in a place like Pinewood Diner are thin enough that you can hear the griddle hiss from the parking lot. Words spoken in cruelty carry even farther. Want me to handle this, Ruth? No, Earl. I got it. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. Ruth could feel something building in her chest, something that felt like tears but tasted like anger. 31 years of this, 31 years of smiling through it, 31 years of being treated like she was less than human because she brought people food for a living. Usually she could handle it. Usually she could let it roll off. Like water off the surface of something that has been rained on so long, it barely notices anymore. But this morning, with the arthritis screaming in her knees and the empty prescription bottles, and Lily asking when Daddy was coming home, and the check engine light, and the shoebox under the bed, and the 15 years of unanswered questions about why her husband had to die this morning, it was harder. This morning, the rain was finding cracks. At table 9, Deacon was praying, actually praying, lips moving silently. The way he prayed before they rolled into difficult situations. The way he prayed when he could feel the world tilting toward a moment that couldn't be taken back. Briggs had his phone out recording, just in case. Colton was watching Ruth's face when she came back out with the second order, watching the way she was holding herself together with grit and determination in the muscle memory of 3 decades of not breaking down in front of customers. Colton Reed had been a medic for 22 years. He had seen men hold their guts in with their bare hands and still crack jokes because the alternative was scaring the person next to them. He had seen women walk on broken legs to get their children to safety because the body will do impossible things when it is told that someone else needs it. He knew what barely holding on looked like. He had seen it in field hospitals and combat zones and VA waiting rooms. Ruth was barely holding on. 15 minutes passed. The kitchen remade Garrett's order exactly to his specifications. Ruth carried it out, set it down. And before she could even step back, Garrett cut into the eggs. His face transformed, theatrical disgust becoming theatrical rage. The kind of rage that is not born from genuine emotion, but from the pleasure of watching someone cower. Are you kidding me right now? His voice cut through the diner's morning chatter like a knife through silk. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused halfway to every mouth. This is exactly the same thing you brought me before. Sir, I promise you we remade everything exactly as you requested. Don't call me sir like that is going to fix your incompetence. Garrett stood up abruptly. Suddenly he was towering over Ruth, 6 feet tall, athletic from tennis lessons and personal trainers, using every inch of that height to make her feel small, to remind her that in the hierarchy of the world as he understood it, he was above and she was below. Ruth Calloway was 5'4", 62 years old, running on 5 hours of sleep and the weight of a world that had not been kind, standing in the shadow of a 19-year-old boy who had never carried anything heavier than his own expectations. This is garbage. Absolute garbage. I don't know what kind of place you think you're running here, but this is unacceptable. He picked up the plate, slammed it down on the table. The crash echoed, eggs scattered across the formica, toast broke into pieces. Fruit rolled onto the floor. Strawberries and melon landing in a pattern that looked random but felt deliberate, felt like the aftermath of something. The diner went silent, not quiet, silent. The difference between those two things is a canyon. Quiet is the absence of noise. Silence is the presence of something else, something heavy, something that holds the room in place like gravity holds the earth. Ruth stood there frozen. For just a moment, the professional mask slipped. For just a moment, she was not a waitress. She was not an employee. She was not a function. She was just a tired woman being humiliated in front of everyone she had served for 3 decades. In front of Vernon Weeks, who she had poured coffee for every morning for 12 years. In front of Earl, who had given her a job when nobody else would. In front of 10 men who had made her feel for the first time in years like she mattered. Let me get you something else. Let you get me what another round of food poisoning. Garrett's voice dripped with contempt now. Each word chosen carefully. Each syllable designed to wound. He was enjoying this. That was the thing Ruth recognized. The thing that made it different from the usual rudeness. The usual impatience. He was enjoying watching her shrink. You know what your problem is? People like you think showing up and doing the bare minimum is worth something. This is why you work in a place like this. This is why you will always work in places like this. You are not good enough for anything better. At table 9, Briggs's knuckles went white around his coffee cup. Colton set down his fork with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Deacon stopped praying and started watching. Really watching. The way a shepherd watches when a wolf enters the field. Boone Garrett's entire body had gone still. The way a predator goes still before it moves. The way a man goes still when 48 years of memory come flooding back in a single moment. The expensive suit, the twisted wrist, the empty eyes, the bathroom tile, the gun, the note, I am sorry. But Ruth spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. I apologize. I can offer you something else. Or if you'd prefer, there's no charge for your meal today. Do you know who my father is? Garrett's voice turned cold now. Dangerous in a different way. The way a threat is dangerous when it is backed by power. When it is backed by the knowledge that the world will take your side because the world has always taken your side. Senator Lowell Hargrove, one phone call and this whole place shuts down. One phone call and you are out of whatever pathetic job this is. So maybe you should think really carefully about how you handle this next part. He stood there waiting, expecting her to crumble, to apologize again, to make it right. The way people had always made it right for Garrett Hargrove III. The way the world had been smoothed and paved and cleared of obstacles for every day of his 19 years. Ruth walked back to the kitchen. Her hands were trembling now, not slightly, visibly. The tremor she had been hiding all morning was out in the open for anyone to see. Earl saw it, moved to intercept. Ruth, let me handle this. Let me throw him out. This is my place, and I don't have to serve anyone who treats my people like that. No, Earl, I got it. It's fine. But her voice cracked on the word fine, and everyone heard it. Earl heard it. The kitchen heard it. The walls heard it. She remade the order herself this time. Hands shaking, eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. Because if she cried, she lost. If she cried, Garrett won. If she cried, every difficult customer for the last 31 years won. Every man who had snapped his fingers at her. Every woman who had complained about the temperature of her soup. Every teenager who had left a mess and no tip. Every person who had looked through her like she was made of glass. So she didn't cry. She made the eggs, toasted the bread, plated the fruit, and she walked back out there with her chin up and her shoulders back. Because Ruth Calloway had raised a son alone and buried a husband and was raising a granddaughter now. And she didn't quit. Not ever. Not when the furnace died. Not when the insurance lapsed. Not when Micah called from prison crying. Not when Lily asked about her grandfather and Ruth had to explain death to a 6-year-old. She set the plate in front of Garrett, stepped back, waited. He didn't even look at the food, just picked up his fork, took one theatrical bite of the eggs, chewed slowly like he was a food critic at some Michelin-starred restaurant instead of a spoiled child in a small-town diner. Chewing slowly because the slow chewing was part of the performance, part of the cruelty, making her stand there, making her wait for his verdict like her worth depended on it. Then his face contorted, exaggerated revulsion. This is disgusting. He dropped the fork. The clatter echoed in the silence. Absolutely disgusting. How many times do I have to tell you people how to do the most basic thing? He stood up, used his height, towered over her, and Ruth Calloway, 62 years old, survivor of poverty and grief and 3 decades of people like Garrett Hargrove, felt something inside her start to break. Not her resolve, not her dignity, her hope. That small kernel of hope that says tomorrow might be better. That says this job has meaning. That says treating people with respect might actually matter in the end. That small flame that had been flickering for years, barely alive, barely warm enough to feel. Garrett saw it, saw that crack forming, and like any predator, he went for it. You know what? His voice dropped. Quieter, more deliberate, more cruel. The kind of quiet that is worse than shouting because it is chosen. Because it means the person has thought about what they are doing and decided to do it anyway. I don't think you are worth the effort. And then he did it. He spit directly in her face, deliberately, with a kind of contempt that turns a human being into a target, a person into an object to be degraded. Not an impulsive act, a considered one. A statement that said, I see you and I have decided you are less than nothing. The diner froze. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every fork paused halfway to every mouth. The coffee maker stopped gurgling. Earl, emerging from the kitchen, stopped mid-step. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. The clock on the wall behind the counter continued to tick, but nobody heard it. Nobody heard anything except the sound of their own shock. The sound of a line being crossed that could never be uncrossed. One human being had just decided another human being was beneath basic dignity, and 10 men at table 9 had just witnessed it. Ruth stood there, the spit slowly sliding down her cheek. Her hand came up, automatically reached for her apron to wipe it away, but stopped halfway, as if the hand itself couldn't believe what had happened, as if the body was still processing what the mind already knew. Tears formed in her eyes, not from pain, from humiliation, from the sudden crushing weight of being made invisible and then violated in front of everyone she knew, in front of Vernon Weeks, who she had served every morning for 12 years, in front of Earl, who was more like family than a boss, in front of 10 men who had given her the gift of feeling protected. From knowing she needed this job, needed the tips, needed to smile through this because Lily needed new shoes and the electric bill was due and the Honda needed fixing and she couldn't afford to fight back. Couldn't afford the luxury of outrage. Couldn't afford to be a person with feelings because the rent didn't care about her feelings. So she stood there, spit on her face, silence crushing down around her. And Boone Garrett stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the linoleum floor cut through the silence like a rifle shot. Not dramatic, not loud, But in that moment, it was the only sound in the entire world. The sound of a man who had been waiting 48 years to stand when standing was needed. Boone had made a promise to himself after watching his mother cry, after finding her body, after burying her with the knowledge that he could have done something, should have done something. That promise was simple. 5 words that had become the foundation of everything he had built. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. He had built a motorcycle club around that promise, recruited men who believed it, lived it for 30 years, rode through rain and snow and desert heat to keep it. And on this morning in this diner, that promise was being called due. Boone walked across the floor with a kind of calm that comes from a man who has been in real danger and knows this isn't it. This wasn't a firefight. This wasn't an ambush. This was something simpler and in some ways more important. This was a man choosing to stand between cruelty and its victim. His boots made steady, measured sounds against the linoleum. He wasn't rushing, wasn't posturing, just moving with purpose. The way a man moves when he has made a decision and nothing is going to unmake it. He stopped beside Garrett's table, close enough to be present, not threatening, not aggressive, just there. The way a wall is there, the way a mountain is there, something you cannot walk through no matter how important you think you are. His voice when it came was low and steady, the voice of a man who had given orders under fire and expected them to be followed. You are going to apologize to the lady. Garrett looked up from his phone. Confusion flickered across his face. Then he saw the leather vest, the patches, the silver beard, the eyes that had seen things Garrett couldn't imagine. And something like amusement crossed his features. The amusement of a child who thinks the rules don't apply to him. He actually laughed. Are you serious right now? You need to step back, old man, before you get yourself in trouble. Behind Boone, 9 chairs scraped against the floor in near unison. Briggs, Colton, Deacon, Maddox, Gage, Rowan, Barrett, Lawson, Pike. Standing up, not moving forward, not threatening, just present. A wall of leather and solidarity, and the kind of quiet authority that comes not from weapons or wealth, but from shared conviction. The only person in trouble here is you, son. Boone's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. That woman deserves an apology, and you are going to give her one. Garrett stood up, puffed his chest, trying to reclaim the height advantage, trying to remember he was supposed to be the one with power here, trying to summon the confidence that had never failed him before because it had never been tested before. You know what I'm calling the police? This is harassment. You are threatening me. He pulled out his phone, waved it like a weapon. The weapon of his generation. The belief that documentation was power, that recording something made you the victim. My father is Senator Lowell Hargrove, and when he hears about this, you are going to wish you stayed in whatever hole you crawled out of. The Iron Covenant didn't move, didn't speak. They didn't have to. Their presence was the message. 10 men who had seen real violence and real sacrifice standing in a small-town diner, making it clear that this boy had crossed a line they weren't going to let him walk back from easily. For the first time in his 19 years of life, Garrett Hargrove III felt what actual consequences might look like. Not theoretical consequences, not the kind that come in the form of a reduced allowance or a stern conversation with a headmaster who owes your father a favor. Real consequences. The kind that live in the eyes of men who have buried friends and earned in their scars. His confidence wavered. His hand with the phone dropped slightly. But pride is a powerful thing, especially in young men who have never had to back down from anything in their lives. His jaw set, his shoulders squared. You think you scare me? You think some biker gang costume party is going to make me do anything? His voice rose, but there was a brittleness to it now, like ice cracking under weight. Like the sound something makes just before it breaks. I don't owe that woman anything. She is a waitress. She screwed up my order 3 times. If anything, she should apologize to me. Boone took a breath, the kind of breath a teacher takes before explaining something to a student who is not getting it, who might never get it. But you try anyway, because that is what teachers do. That is what fathers do when they haven't given up on the possibility that a boy can become a man. Let me tell you something about respect, son. His voice stayed calm, patient, even. We don't start trouble. We ride our bikes, we go to work, we take care of our families, but we finish disrespect, especially when it is aimed at people who can't defend themselves without losing everything they have. He gestured toward Ruth. She was still standing there, frozen. The spit now wiped away with her apron, but the stain of it still visible on her cheek, still visible in her eyes. The kind of stain that doesn't come out with soap and water. The kind that lives inside you. That woman has more dignity in her exhausted smile than you will have in your entire life, and you spit on her. In front of everyone, like she is nothing. She is nothing. The words came out before Garrett could stop them. Automatic, reflexive. The kind of thing you say when you have been raised to believe it so thoroughly you don't even question it anymore. The way you breathe without thinking about breathing. He believed it the way he believed in gravity. Then we have a problem. Boone's tone didn't change, but something in the air shifted. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Something that had been possible, a peaceful resolution, a lesson learned through conversation, had just become less possible. Garrett moved toward the door, trying to end this on his terms, trying to walk away with some shred of control, the way he had always walked away from things, with his back straight and his phone in his hand, and the certainty that someone else would clean up whatever mess he left behind. But as he approached the exit, he found his path blocked. Not aggressively, not threateningly. Briggs and Colton were just standing there near the door, existing in the space Garrett needed to occupy. Two men in their 60s who looked like they had nothing in the world to do except stand exactly where they were standing for exactly as long as they felt like standing there. "Excuse me," Garrett's voice tight. They didn't move. Behind the counter, Earl Tatum picked up the phone. His hand shook slightly as he dialed. But it wasn't the police he was calling. It was someone else. Someone who needed to know that his son had just crossed a line there was no coming back from. Garrett turned back to the room. 10 bikers, one waitress still frozen by table 7, a diner full of witnesses, and for the first time in his 19 years, nowhere to run. "Fine, fine, I apologize." "Okay." Happy, the words came out flat, perfunctory, the kind of apology that means nothing because it costs nothing, because it is not an apology at all. It is a transaction, a toll paid to get through a gate. Boone shook his head slowly. "That is not how this works. What do you want from me? I want you to understand what you did. I want you to feel it. And I want you to learn from it." I said, "I'm sorry. Sorry is just a word, son. You don't learn by apologizing. You learn by understanding." And in that moment, as Garrett Hargrove III stood in Pinewood Diner surrounded by 10 men who had decided he wasn't leaving until something fundamental changed, the door opened. Senator Lowell Hargrove walked in, 56 years old, expensive suit, silver hair combed back with the precision of a man who understood that appearance was policy. Political smile that died the moment he saw his son surrounded by leather vests and judgment. Behind him, the morning light poured through the glass door, catching the dust motes in the air, and for one strange moment, the diner looked like a courtroom. Two sides, one judgment coming. "What the hell is going on here?" His voice had that senatorial boom. That I'm in charge authority that came from 20 years of people doing what he said because he said it. Boone turned to face him, and in that moment, recognition flickered across both their faces. Like two men seeing each other across a battlefield they had both thought was abandoned. They knew each other, or rather, they had known each other a long time ago. In a different context. In a courtroom where a young lawyer named Lowell Hargrove had defended a man accused of assaulting a waitress named Lorraine Garrett, had gotten him off on a technicality, had destroyed Lorraine's credibility on the stand, had made her look like a liar. 2 weeks later, Lorraine Garrett was dead, and Boone Garrett had never forgotten the man who made that possible. The universe has a way of settling debts. Sometimes it takes 48 years. Sometimes it settles them all at once in a diner on a Thursday morning with 10 leather vests and a coffee pot and a woman with spit drying on her cheek. "Senator," Boone's voice was perfectly neutral. "Your son just assaulted one of my friends. That is ridiculous." "Garrett would never," he spit in her face. "I have video. So do half the people in this diner." Lowell Hargrove's political instincts kicked in immediately. Damage control, mitigation, the machinery of power spinning up to protect what needed protecting. The same machinery that had protected him for 30 years. The same machinery that had turned a young lawyer's courtroom victory into a political career and a dead woman into a forgotten footnote. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. Garrett apologized to the woman and let's go. He already apologized, Senator. Words are cheap. Your son needs to learn what consequences feel like. Are you threatening my son? No, sir. I'm offering him an education. The two men stared at each other. 48 years of history hanging between them. A dead woman neither of them could forget. One because she was his mother. The other because she was the case that launched his career. What do you want? Lowell Hargrove's voice was cold now. Calculating. 60 days. Your son works here. Full shifts. Learns what it means to serve people. Learns what Ruth does every single day. At the end of 60 days, we are done. He goes back to his life. But he goes back different. That's absurd. I'll have my attorneys here within the hour. You'll what Senator sue us, go ahead. We have got video of your son assaulting a 62-year-old woman. Wonder how that plays in an election year. Wonder how it plays when I send it to every news outlet in the state. Wonder how it plays when the people who vote for you see your son treating a working woman like she is subhuman. Lowell Hargrove's jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists, then relaxed. The political calculation running. The risk assessment. The cost-benefit analysis of a man who had spent 2 decades weighing options and choosing the most advantageous path. Fine, 60 days, but this ends here. No press, no charges. This ends, Boone nodded once. This ends when your son learns what he needs to learn, not before. Senator Hargrove grabbed his son's arm, pulled him toward the door, but before they left, he turned back one more time. You are making a mistake, Garrett. Boone met his eyes. 48 years of weight behind every word. I made my mistake 48 years ago, Senator, when I didn't stand up for my mother. I'm not making it again. The door closed behind them. The Mercedes roared to life, pulled out of the parking lot, gravel spitting from expensive tires. The diner stayed silent for another moment, processing, absorbing, understanding that something fundamental had just shifted. Then Earl started clapping, slow, deliberate, one man showing respect. The sound of his weathered palms meeting was barely louder than a heartbeat, but in the stillness of that diner, it carried the weight of 31 years of watching Ruth Calloway work harder than anyone he had ever known. Vernon Weeks joined in, then the couple at table 3, then the trucker at the counter who had been quietly eating his hash browns, then everyone. A small diner full of regular people showing Ruth Calloway what Garrett Hargrove had never understood. That dignity is not given, it is claimed, and sometimes it is defended. Ruth stood there, tears finally falling, but not from humiliation anymore, from something else, something that felt like being seen, like mattering, like 31 years of invisible work suddenly becoming visible to every person in the room. Boone walked over to her gently, carefully, the way you approach someone who has been hurt, the way you approach a person when you understand that the hurt goes deeper than the moment. You okay, Ruth? She nodded, couldn't speak yet. You didn't deserve that, any of that. Thank you, barely a whisper. Nothing to thank me for. That is just what family does. And Ruth Calloway, who had been alone for so long, she had forgotten what it felt like to have people stand with her, finally understood. She wasn't alone anymore. The Iron Covenant had made her their business. And they didn't quit. Not ever. She wiped her eyes, straightened her apron, picked up the coffee pot, and went back to work. Because that is what Ruth Calloway did. She showed up, she endured, and she kept going. But something had changed, not just in the diner, not just in the eyes of the people who had witnessed what happened. Something had changed in Ruth. A small flame that had been dying for years, smothered under grief and exhaustion, and the weight of a life that never got easier had been fanned back to life. Not hope exactly, something harder, something with teeth, resolve. Because late that night, after the shift was over, and Lily was asleep and the house was quiet, Ruth pulled the shoebox out from under her bed. Walter's medical records, the denied claims, the reduced benefits, the paperwork that said her husband's life wasn't worth saving. She spread them across the kitchen table. Read them again. Really read them. And for the first time, she didn't just see bureaucratic language and confusing codes. She saw a pattern. Benefits reduced across the board in 2009. Multiple veterans affected. Appeals routed to the same office. Denied by the same department. She found a yellow legal pad in the junk drawer, started writing down dates, amounts, claim numbers, the name of the department that had denied Walter's appeals. She worked for an hour, maybe more. The kitchen clock ticking past midnight. Her handwriting was careful and precise, the same handwriting that had filled order pads for 3 decades. The same handwriting that had signed Walter's death certificate. When she finally stopped, she had 3 pages of notes. Questions she didn't know how to answer yet. Connections she couldn't quite see. But it was a start. She set the shoebox on the kitchen table instead of under the bed, where she could see it every morning, where it would remind her that some debts don't disappear just because you stop looking at them. Ruth Calloway was done waiting for someone else to ask the questions that needed asking. Tomorrow she would start looking for answers. 3 days later, Garrett Hargrove III pushed through the back door of Pinewood Diner at 5:45 in the morning, wearing borrowed non-slip shoes that didn't fit quite right and an apron that smelled like someone else's shift. The sky was still dark, the kind of dark that makes you question every decision that led you to this moment. The kind of dark where the only sound is your own breathing and the distant hum of a town that is still sleeping. Garrett had never been awake this early in his life, not voluntarily, not for something that mattered. But here he was, because his father had made it very clear that refusing was not an option, not with an election 8 weeks away, not with video footage of his son spitting on a 62-year-old woman potentially 1 click away from going viral. Earl Tatum was already in the kitchen, 67 years old and still the first one in, still firing up the griddle, still brewing the first pot of coffee like he had been doing for 40 years. Morning, Earl's voice. Gravel and assessment. Morning, Garrett's voice. Resentment and exhaustion. Ruth will be here in 15 minutes. She is going to train you. You listen to everything she says. You do everything she tells you. You got questions, you ask. You got attitude, you swallow it. We clear crystal. Good. Coffee's over there. Help yourself. You are gonna need it. Garrett poured a cup, tasted it. It was terrible. The same burnt diner garbage he had complained about 3 days ago. But this morning it was the only caffeine between him and complete collapse. So he drank it. Funny how perspective changes when you are the one who needs something. Ruth arrived at 6 exactly, same worn Honda Civic coughing into the parking lot, same careful walk to the back door favoring her left knee, same quiet efficiency as she tied her apron and checked the dining room setup. She saw Garrett standing by the coffee pot. Their eyes met. Neither spoke for a long moment. What do you say to someone who humiliated you? What do you say to someone you humiliated? There is no script for that, no manual, no chapter in any book about how 2 human beings navigate the space between shame and survival. Morning, Ruth's voice, professional, careful. Morning, Garrett's voice, uncertain. Something that might have been shame if he knew what shame felt like. Earl says you are here to learn, so let's get started. No warmth, no coldness. Just the voice of a woman who had been given a mom and was going to do it because that is what Ruth Calloway did. She showed up, she did the work, even when the work meant training the person who had spit in her face. The first hour was set up. Ruth showed Garrett how to check salt and pepper shakers, how to fill napkin dispensers, how to wipe down tables so they didn't streak, how to arrange the condiments in the specific way that had been the same since 1995. Tasks that seem mindless until you realize they had to be done perfectly every single morning before a single customer walked through that door. Why does it matter which way the ketchup bottle faces, Garrett asked. Not antagonistic, genuinely confused. Because Mrs. Henderson sits at table 4 every Tuesday and Thursday. She has arthritis in her right hand. If the ketchup bottle faces left, she can grab it easier. Small things matter, G. Small kindnesses add up. G. She had called him G, not Garrett, not you, not the Hargrove boy, like he was a person, like he had a name worth using. It was such a small thing, but it landed somewhere deep, in a place he hadn't known existed until that moment. By 7, the diner was open. By 7:15, Vernon Weeks walked through the door and sat at his usual stool. Your turn, Ruth handed Garrett a coffee pot. Go pour Mr. Weeks his coffee. Just like that, just like that. Left hand under the pot, right hand on the handle. Pour smooth, don't fill it all the way to the top. Leave room for cream. Garrett walked over. The coffee pot felt heavier than it should, or maybe his hand was shaking. Maybe both. Morning, Mr. Weeks. Coffee Vernon looked up, recognized him. Garrett saw it happen, saw the moment this retired postal worker remembered the scene from 3 days ago, saw judgment in form. You the Hargrove boy. Not a question, a statement. Yes, sir. You here to learn, or you here because Daddy made you? Garrett opened his mouth. The automatic lie was right there, the easy answer that would smooth this over. But something stopped him. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe the way Ruth was watching from across the room. Maybe something he couldn't name yet. Both, I think. Vernon studied him for a long moment, then held out his cup. Then let's see if you can pour coffee without making a mess of it. Garrett poured. His hands shook slightly. A few drops hit the saucer, but the cup filled. Vernon took a sip. Not bad. You will get better. It was such a small thing, such a nothing moment. But Garrett felt something shift inside him. This man could have destroyed him, could have made this moment unbearable. Instead, he had given him a chance. Small kindnesses add up. By 8, the morning rush started, and Garrett Hargrove III discovered what hard work actually meant. Not hard like tennis practice where you had a coach and water breaks, and someone telling you that you were doing great. Not hard like SAT prep, where the worst consequence was having to take it again. Hard like your feet hurt and your back aches and you have been moving nonstop for 2 hours and there are 4 more hours to go and you cannot sit down because there are people waiting and they don't care that you are tired. Hard like real life. Table 6 wanted their eggs over easy, but they came out over medium, and Garrett had to walk back to the kitchen and ask Earl to remake them. Earl didn't say anything, just cracked 2 new eggs and started again. And Garrett felt the weight of wasting food, wasting time, wasting this man's effort because he hadn't listened carefully enough. Table 9 ordered hash browns crispy, but Garrett wrote down well done. And the kitchen made them too hard. And the customer sent them back with a look that said, you are incompetent. And Garrett felt his face flush with embarrassment, the kind of embarrassment that burns from the inside out. Table 12 wanted decaf. And Garrett poured regular and didn't realize until the woman took a sip and said, this isn't decaf, honey. And Garrett had to apologize and explain and bring a new cup. And the woman was kind about it. But kindness somehow made it worse because he didn't deserve kindness. By 10, Garrett had spilled coffee on himself, twice dropped a plate of toast, gotten 3 orders wrong, and was seriously considering walking out the back door and never coming back. Ruth appeared beside him at the coffee station. Quiet, steady. You are doing fine. I am doing terrible. You are doing fine for day 1. Everybody is terrible on day 1. How long did it take you to get good at this? Ruth smiled, small, sad almost, 31 years, still learning. She walked away before he could respond, but the words stayed with him. 31 years. This woman had been doing this job longer than he had been alive, and she was still learning, still trying, still showing up. What the hell had he been doing with his 19 years? The lunch shift came. More customers, more orders, more opportunities to screw up. And Garrett screwed up plenty. But he also started to notice things. The way Ruth moved through the dining room like water. Efficient, purposeful, never wasting a step. The way she remembered everyone's names, everyone's orders, everyone's preferences. The way she smiled at the rude customers with the same warmth she gave the kind ones. Because the smile wasn't about them. It was about her. About choosing kindness even when kindness wasn't returned. The afternoon crawled by. Garrett finished his shift at 3. 6 hours of work. It felt like 6 years. Every muscle hurt. His feet were killing him. His pride was somewhere on the floor with the spilled coffee and broken toast. But he came back the next day, and the day after that. By the end of week 1, Garrett had learned how to pour coffee without spilling, how to carry 3 plates at once, how to smile at rude customers even when he wanted to scream. He had also learned things about Ruth, that she took the bus to work because her car had broken down and she couldn't afford to fix it, that she was raising her granddaughter alone, that she worked 2 jobs and still barely made rent. One evening after closing, while Garrett was mopping the floor and Ruth was counting the register, she told him about Lily, about the way the girl drew pictures of Walter from photographs because she had never met him, about the way she asked about her father Micah every single night, about the college fund that had $1,400 in it after 8 years of saving. She told him about the night she almost quit, 2016. The furnace died in January, -20 outside. She wrapped Lily in every blanket in the house and drove to the diner because Earl had heat. They slept in booth 6. Lily thought it was an adventure. Ruth thought it was the end an adventure. Ruth thought it was the end, but it wasn't the end because Earl fixed the furnace the next morning, paid for it himself, wouldn't take a dollar back, said Marines don't let their people freeze. And Ruth went back to work that afternoon because that is what she did. Garrett listened to these stories the way you listen to dispatches from a country you have never visited. A country where $1,200 was an impossible sum, where a broken furnace was a crisis, where sleeping in a diner booth was not a charming anecdote, but a measure of how close the edge really was. He had never been close to the edge. He had never even known the edge existed. And now that he could see it, he couldn't stop seeing it in every customer who counted change for their meal. In every tip that was calculated not from generosity, but from what people could afford. In the way Ruth smiled wider on the days she hurt most, as if joy were a debt she owed the world regardless of what the world owed her. He learned that Earl had served in the Marines, that he had opened this diner with money from his GI Bill because he wanted to create a place where everyone was welcome, where service workers were treated with dignity. He learned that the Iron Covenant came every Thursday, not just for coffee, but to check on Ruth, to make sure she was okay, to be the family she didn't have anymore. He learned that the world was full of people who showed up every day and did hard things and never complained because complaining was a luxury they couldn't afford. And he had learned that he had been one of the people making their lives harder. Week 2 started the same as week 1, 5:45 in the morning. Borrowed shoes, Ruth's patient instruction, the morning rush, the mistakes, the small improvements. But on Thursday of week 2, everything changed. The Iron Covenant rolled into the parking lot at 7:15. Same as always. 10 motorcycles, same formation, same ritual. They walked into the diner and saw Garrett behind the counter pouring coffee for Vernon Weeks. Boone Garrett stopped. The 9 men behind him stopped. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Boone nodded. Once. Small. Almost imperceptible. It wasn't approval. It was acknowledgement. You are still here. You are still trying. Morning Hammer. Garrett's voice. Uncertain but genuine. Morning G. Coffee ready. Yes, sir. Just made it? Then let's see what you got. Garrett approached table 9 with a coffee pot and 10 cups. His hands didn't shake this time. Or if they did, he controlled it better. He poured for Boone first, then Briggs, then Colton, then Deacon, then the others. Each pour steady, each cup filled just right, left room for cream. When he finished, Briggs looked at his coffee, took a sip. Not bad, kid. Not bad at all. It was the first time any of them had acknowledged him as anything other than the enemy. Garrett felt something warm in his chest. Thank you, sir. Briggs. Call me Briggs. We don't do sir around here. Over the next days, the Brotherhood started teaching him. Not formally, not obviously, but in the way men who have lived full lives teach younger men who are just starting to figure things out. Briggs showed him how to fix the diner's broken ice machine. Taught him that most things that seem complicated are just a matter of patience and the right tools. That knowing how to fix things with your hands gives you a different kind of confidence than money ever could. See this? Briggs pointed to a loose belt. Whole machine is down because of one small part. Life is like that. Small things matter. Take care of the small things. The big things take care of themselves. Colton, the former medic, showed him basic first aid. How to wrap an ankle, how to treat a burn, how to stay calm when someone is bleeding. Panic kills more people than injuries, Colton said. You learn to control your fear. You can save lives. You let your fear control you. You become part of the problem. Deacon, the retired minister, taught him something different, something harder. You know what repentance is, G? They were cleaning up after the lunch shift. Garrett was scrubbing tables. Deacon was sweeping, saying, "You are sorry." No, that is apology. Repentance is changing direction. It is not just feeling bad about what you did. It is becoming someone who wouldn't do it again. How do you know when you have changed enough? You don't. You just keep changing. Keep trying. Keep becoming. That is all any of us can do. At 1:30 on a Tuesday in the third week, a man walked into the diner. Mid-60s, wearing a veteran's cap, moving with the careful stiffness of someone whose body had been through things it remembered. He looked at Garrett. Recognition flickered, then something harder, colder. Ruth saw it, started to move in that direction, but the man held up his hand. I got table 7, Ruth. I want the boy. Garrett walked over. Something in his chest tightened. He knew this feeling now, the feeling of facing something you had done and couldn't undo. What can I get you, sir? The man stared at him long enough that Garrett wanted to look away, but he didn't, couldn't. You know who I am? No, sir. Harlan Jessup. You knew my son. Owen. The name hit Garrett like a physical blow. The diner seemed to tilt beneath his feet. The sounds of morning forks on plates, coffee being poured, the low murmur of conversation, all of it faded until there was nothing in the world except this man's face and the name Owen Jessup, hanging in the air between them like a verdict. Owen Jessup, sophomore year. The kid who had tried to join his friend group. The kid Garrett had decided wasn't good enough, wasn't cool enough. The kid Garrett and his friends had made miserable for 8 months. Stole his lunch, mocked his clothes, posted things about him online, called him names that Garrett couldn't even remember now because they had been so casual, so automatic, so meaningless to the people saying them, and so devastating to the person hearing them. Owen transferred schools, and 18 months later, he killed himself. Mr. Jessup, coffee, black, pancakes, bacon. That is what I want. That is what you are going to get me. And you are going to do it with a smile. Because that is what service workers do. They smile even when they want to scream, even when they want to tell you exactly what they think of you. They smile because it is their job. Harlan's voice was perfectly level, perfectly calm, and absolutely devastating. Yes, sir. Garrett walked to the kitchen. His hands were shaking, really shaking. He gave Earl the order. Earl looked at him, saw something. You all right, kid? That man's son. I knew him. I was not good to him. Earl didn't say anything, just started making the pancakes. But his silence felt like judgment. Garrett brought out the food, set it down carefully. Harlan didn't look at it. You remember my boy? Yes, sir. You remember what you did to him? Yes, sir. You know why he killed himself? Garrett couldn't speak, couldn't move. Depression. That is what the doctor said. Chemical imbalance. Might have happened anyway. But you didn't help, did you? You and your friends, making him feel like he wasn't worth the air he breathed. Mr. Jessup, I'm so... Don't, Harlan's voice, sharp, like a blade drawn across stone. Don't apologize. Apologies are words. Words are cheap. You want to make this right. You can't. My son is dead. Nothing makes that right. But you can learn. You can change. You can become someone who doesn't destroy people for entertainment. He picked up his fork, cut into the pancakes, took a bite. These are good. Tell the cook I said so. Garrett stood there frozen. Mr. Jessup? Harlan looked up, and something in his eyes had changed. Still hard, still hurt, but something else too. Something that looked like the ghost of a kindness that had survived despite everything. My son was kind, even when you weren't, even when nobody was. He believed people could change. I am not sure I believe that, but I am here because Owen would have wanted me to give you a chance. So I am giving you one. Don't waste it. Garrett walked away, made it to the kitchen, leaned against the wall, felt something breaking inside him. Something that had needed to break for a long time. Something hard and brittle that had been masquerading as confidence. Ruth found him there 10 minutes later. Eyes red, breathing shallow. You okay, no? Want to talk about it? I don't deserve to talk about it. Ruth was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, careful. The voice of a woman who had carried grief so long, she recognized it in others the way a doctor recognizes symptoms. Gee, I don't know what you did before you came here. I don't know what kind of person you were, but I know what kind of person you are choosing to be right now. You are here, you are working, you are trying. That matters. Does it matter if I destroyed someone's life? If I am part of the reason someone is dead, I don't know. I don't have those answers. But I know you can't change the past. You can only change what you do next. She walked away, left him with that. You can only change what you do next. And during those weeks, Ruth was changing too. Not in ways the others could see, Not in the diner where she continued to work with the same steady competence she had shown for 3 decades. But at night, after Lily was asleep and the house settled into its familiar creaks and saws, Ruth sat at her kitchen table with Walter's shoebox and the yellow legal pad, and the stubbornness of a woman who had been told no her entire life but kept asking anyway. She had started making phone calls, careful ones, to other veterans' widows she had met at VA support groups years ago, to families who had been denied benefits around the same time as Walter, to a VA clerk named Donna, who had been helpful 15 years ago before she suddenly transferred to an office in Washington and stopped returning calls. Each call was a thread. Each thread led to another thread. And slowly, the way a waitress puts together a complicated order from scattered requests across a crowded dining room, Ruth began to see a pattern. The first widow she called was Marlene Dunbar in Great Falls. Marlene's husband, Roscoe, had served in the Gulf War, came home with respiratory issues. Benefits reduced in 2010, died in 2013. Same language in the denial letters, same department, same signatures. The second was Cora Whitfield in Billings. Her husband, Jerome, 2 tours, Agent Orange exposure, benefits slashed in 2009, spent his last 3 years fighting paperwork instead of fighting the cancer that was eating him alive. The third, the fourth, the fifth, each story different in the details but identical in the architecture of betrayal. Each family told they were alone. Each family believing the system had simply failed them in the random, impersonal way systems fail. None of them knowing that the failure was deliberate, designed, profitable. Benefits had been systematically reduced for veterans in 3 Montana counties between 2008 and 2015. Appeals had been routed through a single office in Helena, denied by the same department, signed off by officials whose names Ruth didn't recognize, but whose decisions had killed her husband. She didn't have proof yet, not the kind that mattered, but she had questions, good questions, the kind that made people uncomfortable when she asked them. On the Thursday of week 4, Ruth did something she had never done before. After the Iron Covenant finished their breakfast, after Garrett cleared table 9 and brought the dishes back, Ruth sat down across from Boone Garrett. "I need to ask you something." Boone studied her face, saw something different there, something sharper than the weariness he was used to seeing. "Ask. You are a lawyer. You help veterans." "I do. When Walter died, his benefits had been reduced. They said his treatment was not cost-effective. I have the paperwork. I have been looking into it. And I think something is wrong. I think it wasn't just Walter." She pulled the yellow legal pad from her apron pocket. 3 weeks of notes, names, dates, numbers, the careful handwriting of a woman who had spent 31 years getting orders right. Boone took the pad, read slowly. His face changed as he turned pages. The easy calm of a Thursday morning breakfast shifted into something harder, something professional. "Ruth, where did you get these names?" "Phone calls, other widows, families, people who had the same thing happen to them." "How many so far?" 11. "All in the same 3 counties, all between 2008 and 2015. All routed through the same office." Boone set down the pad, looked at her with new eyes. Not the eyes of a protector looking at someone who needed protecting. The eyes of a man looking at a partner, an equal, someone who had just handed him a weapon he didn't know existed. "This is serious, Ruth. This is not just paperwork errors. If what you are showing me is right, someone was systematically diverting veterans' benefits. This is federal fraud, I know." 2 words, quiet, certain. The voice of a woman who had buried her husband and raised her granddaughter and waited 15 years for someone to care about what happened to Walter Calloway. "I don't know who did it yet, but I know it was done, and I want to find out." Boone nodded, not the small nod he gave when acknowledging a coffee refill. A different nod. The nod of a man who has just realized the battle he thought was over has a second front. "I know someone who might be able to help. A journalist named Nina Caldwell. She has been investigating financial irregularities in VA spending for 2 years. She is good, she is careful, and she doesn't scare easy." "Then call her," Ruth's voice. Not asking, not requesting, telling. The voice of a woman who had spent 62 years being polite, impatient, and was done waiting for permission to demand answers. Boone made the call that afternoon. 2 days later, FBI agents walked into Pinewood Diner. 2 men in dark suits with government plates on their black SUV. They didn't come for coffee. They came with badges and questions and the particular kind of authority that makes ordinary people go quiet. We are looking for Boone Garrett. We have some questions about the Iron Covenant Motorcycle Club. Earl stepped forward, his marine posture straightening, his voice going flat the way it did when he sensed a threat. What kind of questions? The kind we can't discuss with you. Is Mr. Garrett here? No. Comes in Thursdays usually. Then we will be back Thursday. In the meantime, we will need access to your security footage. All of it. Going back 3 months. Ruth emerged from the kitchen. Her face had gone pale, but her hands were steady, steadier than they had been in weeks. What is this about, ma'am? We are conducting an investigation. That is all I can say. They took the footage, left business cards, drove away. The diner was silent for a long moment after they left. Earl stood behind the counter staring at the business cards. Garrett stood near table 9, his apron still on a coffee pot, still in his hand, understanding with a sick certainty what had happened. His father had made his move. Senator Lowell Hargrove hadn't gotten where he was by playing fair. He had gotten there by understanding that the best defense was a devastating offense. And when your son is being held accountable by his own conscience in a diner full of veterans, you don't negotiate. You attack. You file complaints. You call in favors at federal agencies. You turn the people who embarrassed your son into suspects. That night, Ruth sat at her kitchen table. Not with Walter's shoebox this time, with the FBI agent's business card, turning it over in her fingers, thinking. She could stop. She could put the shoebox back under the bed. She could keep her head down and keep pouring coffee and keep being invisible. That was the safe choice, the smart choice, the choice that kept the diner open and kept her employed and kept Lily fed. But Walter's face kept appearing in her mind. The way he looked in those last weeks, thin, gray, still apologizing for being sick, still telling her it would be okay when they both knew it wouldn't be. Walter had been failed by a system he had fought for, and now that system was being weaponized against the people who had stood up for her. Ruth picked up her phone, scrolled through her recent calls until she found the number Boone had given her. Nina Caldwell, the journalist. She dialed. It rang 4 times. Ruth almost hung up, almost chose safe. Hello, a woman's voice, alert despite the late hour. Is this Nina Caldwell? It is. Who is this? My name is Ruth Calloway. Boone Garrett gave me your number. I have something you need to see. Something about Senator Lowell Hargrove and the Veterans Affairs Healthcare Fund. There was a pause on the other end. The kind of pause that happens when a journalist hears something that makes the hair on the back of their neck stand up. I'm listening. Ruth told her everything. About Walter, about the shoebox, about the 11 other families. About the FBI agents who had come to the diner that morning asking about the Iron Covenant, instead of asking about the millions of dollars that had been stolen from veterans. When she finished, there was silence on the line. Mrs. Calloway, I have been investigating Senator Hargrove for 2 years. I have bank records, emails, financial trails. But I have been missing something. Something that connects the money to real people, real harm, real consequences. I can give you that. Can you meet me tomorrow? I work until 3. I can meet you at 4. Where? The diner. 4 o'clock. Bring everything you have. She hung up, sat in the dark kitchen, felt her heart hammering, felt fear, real fear, the kind she hadn't felt since the night Walter stopped breathing. But underneath the fear, something else. Something that felt like Walter's hand on her shoulder, like his voice in her ear. The voice that used to say when she was scared, "We don't quit, Ruthie. That's not what Callaways do. We don't quit." The next afternoon, Nina Caldwell walked into Pinewood Diner at 4 sharp, mid-40s, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, a leather bag heavy with documents. She sat across from Ruth at table 9, the Iron Covenant's table. For 2 hours, they spread papers across the table like generals mapping a battlefield. Nina's bank records, Ruth's phone logs and notes, Walter's medical files. The patterns matched. The money that should have gone to veterans' health care had been diverted into accounts controlled by entities connected to Senator Lowell Hargrove's campaign operation. $4.2 million over 7 years. And the name that appeared again and again in the authorization chain was the same name on every denial letter in Walter's shoebox. The same department, the same signatures. The same systematic betrayal of the people who had served. One of those veterans was your husband. Nina's voice. Quiet, professional. But underneath it, the controlled fury of a woman who had spent 2 years chasing a story and had just found its beating heart. Walter Calloway, Sergeant, United States Army, 2 tours, Purple Heart, died because his lung cancer treatment was deemed not cost-effective after his benefits were reduced. Ruth's voice didn't waver. Her hands didn't shake. 31 years of holding steady through other people's cruelty had prepared her for this moment. Mrs. Calloway, if we publish this, it will bring a storm down on you, on this diner, on everyone connected to this story. Senator Hargrove will fight back. He will fight dirty. Are you sure you want to do this? Ruth looked at Nina Caldwell, looked at the papers spread across the table, looked at Walter's name on a denial letter that had sentenced him to death. My husband served his country for 12 years. He came home and worked hard and loved his family and never asked for anything he hadn't earned. And they let him die because a politician needed money for his campaign. So yes, I am sure, she paused. I have been invisible my whole life, Ms. Caldwell. Invisible people see things that powerful people miss, and I have been watching for a very long time. Nina smiled, the smile of a journalist who has just found the source that will make an entire investigation come alive. Then let's make sure they see you now. Late that night, the phone call came. Garrett was lying in his childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, still wearing clothes that smelled like fryer grease and coffee. His father hadn't spoken to him in 3 days, not since the FBI showed up at the diner. The phone buzzed, unknown number. Hello, it is Boone. We need to talk. Garrett sat up. How did you get my number? Doesn't matter. Meet me at the diner. 20 minutes. Come alone. The line went dead. He should have ignored it, should have stayed in bed. But Ruth's face when those FBI agents walked in kept flashing through his mind, the way her hands had stayed steady while her eyes showed fear. He drove to Pinewood Diner through empty streets. The Mercedes felt wrong now. Too big, too clean, too much like the life he was beginning to understand had been built on other people's suffering. The diner was dark except for one light in the back. Boone's motorcycle sat alone in the parking lot. Garrett pulled in beside it. The back door was unlocked. Boone sat at table 9, 2 cups of coffee already poured. Sit. Garrett sat. Your father called the FBI, filed a complaint, said the Iron Covenant was a criminal organization, said we coerced his son, threatened him, extorted your family. That is not true, I know that. You know that. But the FBI has to investigate, and investigations have a way of destroying things even when they don't find anything. Earl could lose his business license. Ruth could lose her job. I could lose my law license, which means I can't help veterans anymore. All because your father wants to protect his political career. I will tell them. I will tell the FBI it is not true. They won't believe you. You are his son. They will think you are covering, or that we got to you. Then what do we do? Boone took a sip of coffee, slow, deliberate, the way a man drinks when he has already made his decision and is just waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Ruth found something your father doesn't know she found, something that changes everything. He told Garrett about the shoebox, about Ruth's investigation, about Nina Caldwell and the bank records and the $4.2 million stolen from Veterans Healthcare, about Walter Calloway, whose treatment was denied because Senator Lowell Hargrove needed campaign money. Garrett sat there, processing, each revelation landing like a blow to the chest. Ruth's husband died because of my father. It wasn't a question. Boone didn't answer. He didn't have to. And I spit in her face the weight of that sentence, the geometry of cruelty. His father had stolen a man's health care. His father's son had spit on that man's widow. 2 generations of Hargroves destroying the same woman, the same family, the same life. What do you need me to do? Boone studied him. Are you here because you are scared of your father or because you actually give a damn about what happens to Ruth? Both, but mostly because of Ruth and Earl and you guys, because you gave me a chance when you didn't have to, because for the first time in my life, I am doing something that matters, and I don't want to lose that. Good. Then here's what we are going to do. But first, you need to understand something. This didn't come from me. It didn't come from the brotherhood. This came from Ruth. She found the evidence. She made the calls. She contacted the journalist. She is the one who decided to fight. We are just making sure she doesn't have to fight alone. Ruth did this. Ruth did this. That woman you spit on, that waitress you said was nothing. She's about to bring down a United States senator. And she is doing it because she believes her husband's life mattered. Because she believes every veteran's life matters. Because she has been invisible her whole life and she is done being invisible. The plan was simple, dangerous but simple. 3 days from now, on a gray Thursday morning, Garrett would stand on the steps of the Ridge Creek County Courthouse. He would tell the truth, all of it, and Ruth would stand beside him. 3 days later, with rain threatening and clouds the color of old iron hanging low over the Montana mountains, Garrett Hargrove III stood on the courthouse steps with a microphone in front of him and 27 members of the local press crowding the lawn. His father had no idea this was happening. Neither did his father's lawyers. Neither did anyone except Boone Ruth, Nina Caldwell, and the 10 men of the Iron Covenant who stood at the bottom of the steps like sentinels. But it was Ruth who stood beside him at the microphone. Not behind him, not in the crowd, beside him, because this was her fight, her evidence, her husband's life. Garrett spoke first, his voice unsteady but clear. My name is Garrett Hargrove III. I am the son of Senator Lowell Hargrove. 5 weeks ago, I spit in the face of a 62-year-old waitress named Ruth Calloway because she brought me the wrong breakfast order. I did it because I have been raised my entire life to believe that people like her don't matter, that service workers are beneath me, that my family's money and power make me better than everyone else. His voice cracked. He pushed through. I was wrong about everything. He told them about the Iron Covenant, about the 60 days, about learning what service meant, about discovering that the people he had considered beneath him were carrying the weight of a world he had never bothered to see. Then Ruth stepped to the microphone. The crowd shifted. Cameras adjusted. Something about this woman, this small, gray-haired woman in a clean apron she had put on out of habit, commanded attention. Not through volume or charisma, through presence, through the quiet authority of someone who has earned every word she is about to say. My name is Ruth Calloway. I have been a waitress for 31 years. My husband was Sergeant Walter Calloway. United States Army, 2 tours, Purple Heart. He died in 2011 because the Veterans Affairs system denied his cancer treatment. They said it was not cost-effective. Her voice was steady, the steadiest it had been in weeks, months, years. For 15 years, I believed the system had failed my husband, the way systems fail sometimes, impersonally, randomly, the way things break down and nobody's fault. She paused. I was wrong. It wasn't random. It wasn't impersonal. It was deliberate. She held up a folder, the same folder that had sat in a shoebox under her bed for 15 years, the same paper she had spread across her kitchen table at midnight, the same evidence she had spent weeks connecting phone call by phone call, widow by widow, dead veteran by dead veteran. Senator Lowell Hargrove has been stealing from veterans for 7 years. $4.2 million that should have gone to health care for the men and women who served this country. My husband was one of those veterans. He died because his treatment was defunded to pay for a politician's campaign. The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Ruth didn't flinch. I am not a lawyer. I am not an investigator. I am a waitress who pours coffee and remembers how people take their eggs. But I am also a widow, and a mother, and a grandmother, and I spent 31 years being invisible, being polite, being patient, waiting for someone else to ask the questions that needed asking. Her voice dropped, quieter now, more personal. Nobody asked, so I did. She stepped back. Nina Caldwell took her place and began distributing documents to the press corps. Bank records, email trails, the complete evidence package that Ruth Calloway, a 62-year-old waitress with a yellow legal pad and a telephone, and the stubbornness of a woman who refused to let her husband be forgotten, had helped assemble. Garrett walked down the courthouse steps on legs that felt like water. Boone was waiting at the bottom. The whole brotherhood. They had come, stood witness, made sure neither Garrett nor Ruth had to do this alone. You did good, kid. Boone's voice quiet, proud. I just destroyed my father's career. Maybe my own life. I don't know what happens now. Now you find out what you're made of. Now you learn that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good, but it is still right. Ruth stood behind them. She had closed the diner for the morning to be here. When Garrett met her eyes, he saw tears. Thank you. Her voice barely audible over the chaos of the press conference behind them. I'm sorry it took me this long. I'm sorry about Walter. I'm sorry my family I know. And I forgive you. That is what you do when someone actually changes. You forgive them. You let them start over. The next 72 hours were chaos. Senator Lowell Hargrove's office issued a statement denying everything, called Garrett a troubled young man suffering from delusions, blamed the Iron Covenant for brainwashing his son. But the evidence was too solid, too detailed. Bank records don't lie. Email trails don't lie. And the testimony of 11 veterans' families connected by a waitress with a legal pad and a telephone doesn't lie either. By Friday afternoon, the FBI had shifted its investigation from the Brotherhood to the senator. By Saturday morning, two major newspapers had run front-page stories. By Sunday, Senator Lowell Hargrove's chief of staff had resigned. Garrett spent those 3 days at the diner, working, because he didn't know what else to do, because the work kept him grounded, because Ruth and Earl and the Brotherhood needed him. And for the first time in his life, being needed felt like something worth having. His father tried to call 37 times. Garrett didn't answer. What was there to say? Everything had been said. Everything had been done. On Monday morning, a week after the press conference, the video finally surfaced. Not the security footage from the diner that had been seized by the FBI. Someone had been in the diner that morning 5 weeks ago with a phone. Someone had recorded the whole thing. Garrett spitting on Ruth, the Brotherhood standing up, the confrontation. It went viral in 6 hours. 8 million views by Tuesday morning, 15 million by Wednesday. The hashtag Justice for Ruth was trending across every platform. Earl's phone rang off the hook. News crews showed up at the diner. Ruth couldn't walk to the bus stop without cameras following her. And a GoFundMe appeared. Nobody knew who started it. The account was anonymous. But the goal was simple. Help Ruth Calloway. Help a woman who had spent 31 years serving others finally get a break. It hit $50,000 in the first day, $200,000 by the end of the week. By the time it closed 2 weeks later, it had raised $1.8 million. Ruth sat at table 9 staring at the number on Earl's computer screen. Boone beside her, Garrett across from her. She couldn't speak, couldn't process. This isn't real, her voice broken, overwhelmed. It is real, Ruth. People saw what happened, saw you, saw your dignity, and they wanted to help. I don't deserve this. You deserve this more than anyone I have ever met. Boone's voice, firm, certain. Ruth cried then, really cried, 31 years of holding it together finally breaking. Not breaking apart, breaking open. The way a seed breaks open to become something more than it was. The legal proceedings moved fast once they started. Senator Lowell Hargrove was indicted on 17 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of federal funds. He resigned from the Senate 2 days after the indictment, pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence, 8 years in federal prison, eligible for parole in 5. Garrett sat in the courtroom for the sentencing. His mother hadn't come. She had filed for divorce a week after the indictment, was already living with her sister in Connecticut, already pretending this had never happened. But Garrett came, because his father was still his father, because some debts you can't walk away from. Lowell Hargrove looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, older, diminished. When they let him out of the courtroom, he looked at Garrett. Just once, their eyes met. Garrett expected anger, expected blame. Instead, Lowell Hargrove nodded, small, almost imperceptible. The way you nod when you finally understand something you have been refusing to see. Then he was gone. Garrett sat in the empty courtroom for a long time after everyone left, wondering what came next. You wondering if it was worth it, Ruth's voice. She had come to the sentencing too. Sat in the back row, waited until everyone left. Yeah, was it? I don't know. I destroyed my father, my family, my whole life. No, your father destroyed himself. You just stopped protecting him from the consequences. There's a difference. She sat beside him. What happens now? For me, I am retiring. Earl is selling the diner. I'm going to use some of that GoFundMe money to go back to school, finish my nursing degree. Maybe I can help people the way Doc helps people. Help veterans get the care they deserve. Make sure what happened to Walter doesn't happen to anyone else. That's amazing. What about you? What happens to Garrett Hargrove III now? He thought about it, really thought about it. I don't want to be Garrett Hargrove III anymore. That guy was terrible. I'm just G now. Just a kid who is trying to figure out how to be better than he was. Good. That is a good place to start. 6 months later, on a cold November morning, Pinewood Diner closed its doors for the last time. Earl had sold it to a developer. A chain restaurant was going in, something generic and profitable. But Earl was 67. He had earned his retirement. The last breakfast service was invitation only. Vernon Weeks, the regulars, the Iron Covenant, Ruth, Garrett. They sat at their usual tables, ate their usual orders, said goodbye to a place that had meant something. But the real ceremony happened afterward. Earl unlocked a storage room in the back and pulled out a brass plaque. Made this special, his voice thick. Figured it needed to go somewhere that matters. The plaque read Lorraine's Place, reserved for Iron Covenant MC, protectors of dignity. This is for your mom, Hammer, for what she meant, for what you built in her name. Boone took the plaque, ran his fingers over the engraved letters. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Where should it go? Somewhere that needs protecting. Somewhere service workers need to know someone is watching. Somewhere people need to remember that dignity isn't negotiable. They installed it 3 days later at a small diner across town, a place that reminded them of Pinewood, a place where the new owner understood what the plaque meant. Table 9 became sacred space again. And every Thursday the Brotherhood returned, kept their ritual, kept their promise. Garrett worked there part-time while finishing community college. He had transferred from Georgetown, couldn't afford it anymore, didn't want it anymore. He was studying social work now, wanted to help people the way he had been helped. He lived in a small apartment he could barely afford, drove a used Honda because the Mercedes had been seized as part of his father's asset forfeiture, worked 40 hours a week on top of school because that is what you did when your trust fund evaporated and you had to learn how real people lived. It was hard, exhausting, sometimes humiliating. It was also the most honest thing he had ever done. Ruth finished her nursing degree in 4 months. She had been 3 semesters away when she dropped out in 1985 to take care of Micah. 39 years later, she walked back into a classroom and picked up where she left off. The youngest students in her cohort were Garrett's age. They treated her with a mixture of awe and curiosity. The 62-year-old woman who had brought down a senator and gone viral and used the money to go back to school. She started working at the VA hospital in January, helping veterans navigate the system, making sure claims were filed correctly, making sure nobody fell through the cracks the way Walter had fallen through them, making sure the bureaucratic language that had killed her husband was translated into plain English for families who deserved to understand what was happening to their loved ones. One Thursday morning, Ruth walked into the new diner and found Boone at table 9. Got something to show you. She pulled out her phone, showed him a photo, a young man in clean clothes, early 30s, solemn face, nervous eyes. Who's that, Micah? My son. He is being released next month. Early parole. Good behavior. He has been sober 3 years. Going into a halfway house. Wants to meet Lily when he is ready. Boone studied the photo, saw something of Ruth in the young man's eyes, something worth saving. You believe he has changed. I believe people can change if they want to badly enough. If they have support, if someone gives them a chance. She looked across the diner. Garrett was serving an elderly couple. Patient, kind, nothing like the boy who had spit on her 6 months ago. Look at G. 6 months ago, I would have said he was hopeless. Now look at him, working 2 jobs, going to school, volunteering at the homeless shelter on weekends. People can change, Hammer. We just have to let them. Boone nodded. Your husband would be proud of you, of what you are doing at the VA, of giving Micah another chance. I think about Walter every day. Think about how different things might have been if someone had stood up for him, if someone had stopped what was happening before it was too late. You can't change the past, no, but you can change what you do next. The door opened. A young woman walked in. Early 20s, nervous, looking around like she wasn't sure she belonged. Garrett approached. Morning, sit anywhere you like. The woman sat at the counter. Garrett poured coffee without being asked. She looked up grateful. You are Garrett Hargrove. I recognize you from the news. Just G. And yeah, that is me. I wanted to meet you, to thank you. My dad was one of the veterans who got his benefits restored after your father's case. He is getting treatment now. He is going to be okay because of what you did. Garrett set down the coffee pot, felt something warm in his chest. Not pride exactly, something quieter, something sustainable. I'm glad your dad is okay. Really glad. It takes courage to stand up to your own family, to choose what is right over what is easy. I just wanted you to know that it mattered. She paid for her coffee, left a $5 tip on a $2 cup, walked out. Garrett stood there holding the $5 bill, thinking about all the people he would never meet who had been helped by what Ruth had uncovered. All the veterans getting care, all the families staying together, all the small ripples spreading from one woman's decision to stop being invisible. Boone appeared beside him. You did good, G. I destroyed my whole life. No, you destroyed the life you were supposed to have, the one your father built on lies and stolen money. You are building a different life now, an honest one. That is worth more, is it? Some days it doesn't feel worth it. Then those are the days you show up anyway. That is what Ruth taught you. That is what she has been doing for 31 years. Showing up when it doesn't feel worth it. And it always ends up being worth it. The months rolled on. Winter came. Snow fell on Ridge Creek. The new diner became a fixture. Garrett kept working, kept studying, kept showing up. His mother called once, asked if he wanted to come for Christmas. He said no. She didn't push. But he spent Christmas at Ruth's house. Her Lily and Micah, who had been out of prison for a month and was doing well. Nervous, uncertain, but doing well. They ate ham and sweet potatoes. Watched Lily open presents. Micah taught her how to play chess. Ruth caught Garrett's eye across the table and smiled. This was family, not the one you are born into, the one you build, the one that sees you at your worst and chooses you anyway. In February, Garrett graduated community college. Top of his class, full scholarship to State University for his bachelor's degree. The whole brotherhood came to the ceremony. Ruth, Earl, even Vernon Weeks. No one from his blood family showed up. But the family he had built filled 2 rows. And when they called his name, when he walked across that stage, they stood and cheered. In March, Boone showed him something, an old newspaper clipping from 1978, an obituary. Lorraine Ann Garrett, age 36, survived by son Boone, 13. Funeral services, private. This is why I do what I do, why the brotherhood exists, why I stood up for Ruth, because nobody stood up for my mom, and I swore that would never happen again. Not while I was breathing. Garrett looked at the faded photo. Lorraine looked like Ruth. Same tired eyes, same determined smile, same dignity despite everything. Do you think she would be proud of you, of what you built? I hope so. I think about her every day. Think about what might have happened if someone had intervened, if someone had made the man who humiliated her face consequences. Maybe she would still be here. You can't change the past. No, but you can change what you do next. And that is what I have been doing for 48 years, making sure nobody stands alone. Thank you for not giving up on me. Garrett's voice quiet. I almost did. That first day when you spit on Ruth, I wanted to put you through a wall. But I remembered something my mom used to say. She said everybody deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. On a warm day in May, nearly a year after that morning at Pinewood Diner, Garrett stood at Arlington National Cemetery in front of a headstone. Frank Joseph Calloway. No, Walter Joseph Calloway. Sergeant, United States Army, 1954 to 2011. Beloved husband and father. Ruth stood beside him. She visited once a month, always brought flowers, always spent an hour talking to a man who couldn't hear her anymore but maybe felt her presence anyway. I never got to meet him. But I am sorry. Sorry for what my father did. Sorry that Walter didn't get the care he deserved. I know. And Walter would have liked you, G, the you that you are now. He believed in second chances, believed people could change if they worked at it. She placed fresh flowers on the grave. White roses, Walter's favorite. You know what the hardest part is? Not the anger. I processed that. It is the what ifs. What if he had gotten treatment? What if we had had 10 more years, 20? What if Lily had gotten to know her grandfather? I can't give you those years back. I can't fix what my father broke, but I can make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. That is what I am going to do. Spend my life making sure veterans get what they deserve. Ruth looked at him. This young man who had been a monster and was becoming something better. Not perfect, still learning, but trying. Always trying. That is all any of us can do. Show up. Try. Make tomorrow a little better than today. They walked back to the car together, the spring sun warm on their shoulders, the cemetery quiet except for the wind through the trees. That night, Garrett sat at his small apartment desk and wrote a letter. He had been writing it for weeks, revising, trying to get the words right. It was addressed to his father in federal prison, not defending what Lowell Hargrove had done, not asking for leniency, just acknowledging that people were more than their worst acts. That redemption was possible if you worked for it. His father had 5 years left on his sentence. Garrett would write him once a month, short letters, updates on life, never asking for anything, never expecting anything. Just letting his father know that someone still saw him as human. Because Ruth had taught him that dignity worked both ways. You didn't withdraw it from people who had lost their way. You held it steady, reminded them it was still there, waited to see if they would reach for it. Maybe his father would. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, Garrett would keep trying. That is what you did when you learned that love looked like accountability, like truth, like refusing to protect people from the consequences of their choices while still believing they could make better choices tomorrow. On the first Thursday of June, Garrett walked into the diner for his morning shift. The brotherhood was already at table 9. Ruth sat with them. She didn't work here anymore, but came by sometimes. Kept the connection. Boone waved him over. Got something for you. He pulled out a leather vest, black, well-worn, the kind that told stories. On the back was a patch, not the full Iron Covenant colors. Something different. A hand extended in help. The words beneath protector in training. You have earned this, not full membership. That takes years, but you have shown you understand what we are about, what we stand for. You are one of us now, G, long as you want to be. Garrett took the vest, felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the honor. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just keep being who you are becoming. Keep protecting people. Keep standing up. Keep learning. That is all we ask. Garrett put on the vest. It fit. He looked around the table at Briggs, who taught him to fix things, at Colton, who taught him to stay calm, at Deacon, who taught him about repentance, at Boone, who taught him about honor, at Ruth, who taught him that dignity wasn't about what people gave you. It was about what you refused to surrender. Thank you for all of it, for giving me a chance when I didn't deserve one. Everybody deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. Boone's voice, his mother's words, carried forward across 48 years and given to a boy who needed them the way a drowning man needs a rope. The day stretched ahead, tables to serve, coffee to pour, people to take care of. Simple work, honest work, work that mattered because it served others. Garrett tied his apron over the vest, picked up a coffee pot, started his rounds. Outside, the Montana sun climbed higher. The town woke up. People started their days each carrying their own burdens, each deserving dignity, each deserving someone to stand up when standing was needed. And inside a small diner, with a brass plaque on the wall, 10 men and 1 woman kept their promise. They showed up. They protected. They reminded the world that honor still existed if you looked for it, that people could change if given the chance, that what you did next mattered more than what you had done before. And that dignity, once defended, rippled outward in ways you would never see but would matter forever. The coffee poured. The day began, the work continued, and Ruth Calloway, who had spent 31 years being invisible, who had lost a husband to greed and a son to addiction, and nearly lost herself to exhaustion, stood at the counter of a small diner in Ridge Creek, Montana, watching a young man pour coffee for an old man, and smiled. Not her work smile, not her armor smile, her real smile, the one she saved for moments when the world proved itself capable of something better than what it usually delivered. She had been a waitress. She was now a nurse. She had been invisible. She was now seen. She had been silent. She had spoken. And the speaking had changed everything. Not because her voice was loud, but because it was true. And sometimes in a world that rewards volume and punishes silence, the truest voice is the one that has been waiting the longest to speak. Ruth Calloway had waited 62 years. And when she finally spoke, a senator fell and a young man rose. 11 families received justice, and a brass plaque on a diner wall reminded everyone who read it that some promises are worth keeping. Protect those who serve. That was the promise. That was the legacy. That was the story of a woman who poured coffee and changed the world. Not because she had to, because she chose to. And that choice, quiet as a cup being filled, steady as hands that never stopped working, enduring as a love that outlasted death itself, that choice made all the difference.